Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Robin, and I'll be serving as the moderator of tonight's virtual telephone town hall with Congressman Johnny Olszewski. Pardon me. The purpose of this event is to give Congressman Olszewski a chance to hear from as many constituents as possible, wherever they may be. This evening, we'll be focusing on the federal budget. As I mentioned, this is an interactive format, and we'd like to be taking as many questions from participants as we possibly can on this event. If you have a question, you can press *3 on your telephone keypad at any time during the call, and you'll be placed in line to speak with a member of the Congressman's staff. That staff member will take down your name and your question. The next time you hear your name, I'll be inviting you to ask your question directly to the Congressman. If you are streaming the event on our website this evening, you can simply type your name and question below the streaming player. And to sign up for the Congressman's e-newsletter, you can press 6 to be placed in line to provide your email address to a staff member. Again, we're going to do our very best to answer as many questions as we possibly can this evening. If you have a question, press *3 on your telephone keypad now or at any time during the call. And to sign up for Congressman Olszewski's newsletter, please press *6 to be placed in line to provide your email address to a staff member. Now, without further delay, I'd like to turn the call over to the Congressman. Congressman, you are live and the floor is yours, sir.
Thanks so much, Robin, and good evening to everyone. I really appreciate you joining us tonight. It is such a great honor to represent Maryland's 2nd District in Congress and to welcome you to our 2nd virtual town hall. I'll just remind you again, if you want to sign up for our newsletter, you can press *6 at any time. And if you want to speak or ask questions later, you can press *3 to be connected. I'm really excited tonight that we are joined not by one, not by two, but by 3 United States senators from Maryland. Tonight, you'll hear from Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen and Maryland Senator Angela Alsobrooks, as well as the now retired but always revered Senator Ben Cardin. I am especially grateful for this opportunity to connect with all of you tonight directly, and so grateful for my colleagues in the Senate for joining us a little bit during these very challenging times. You know, we continue to hear from many of you affected by this administration's drastic change to our system of government. It is an assault on democracy. So whether you're a federal worker, a Social Security or Medicare beneficiary, or just a consumer worried about the impact of the president's tariff proposal, I want you to know, I hear you and I see you. No one on this call is afraid to work together in a bipartisan manner. I come at this work from the perspective of a former county executive with a county council that was split almost evenly between Republicans and Democrats. And I was proud to bring them together to balance budgets, enact common sense gun safety legislation, and to pass police reform while also investing more in public safety. I even led an efficiency effort, saving tens of millions of dollars for taxpayers. In Baltimore County, we created a roadmap that continues to save that county real money without taking a chainsaw to government. In other words, my door is open to Elon Musk and Doge if they want to learn how to do efficiency right. My door is also open to any congressional Republican willing to collaborate with me. I can't tell you how disappointed I am in the continuing resolution that passed last week, a budget plan that excluded Democrats from the negotiating table and that everyone on this call voted against, because it reneges on our promises to our veterans and the vulnerable, cuts nutritional assistance for hungry children and families, and it allows President Trump and Elon Musk to continue their unprecedented takeover of our democratic institutions. I'm extremely disappointed this budget was allowed to become law, because Republicans and a few Democratic senators, again, not those on the call tonight, created a false choice between a bad budget and a shutdown when compromise was possible. We're now 73 days into this session of Congress and 56 days since President Trump was inaugurated. Yet we have yet to take a single vote to lower costs. Meanwhile, grocery prices are rising, inflation is up, and the stock market is sinking. Employees are being fired, core services are at risk. And in fact, rather than lowering costs, the administration's policies are driving prices up. The Trump tariffs alone will increase costs by as much as $2,000 a year for the average family. So I know I join my Senate colleagues in saying we look forward to hearing more about your concerns and priorities, and to answering as many questions as we possibly can in our hour together tonight. But first, we have three outstanding guests. We'll start with Senator Chris Van Hollen, who's now serving his second term in the U.S. Senate after 6 terms in the House of Reps. Senator Van Hollen is also an appropriator. So, Senator, I'm hoping you can shed some light on the continuing resolution and our current budget situation generally, as well as any other thoughts you might have. Senator Van Hollen.
Well, thank you, Congressman Olszewski, and thank everybody for joining us. And I do want to start by thanking the Congressman, not only for convening this town hall, but for his leadership in Congress. He's hit the ground running, and he's been a great partner to me and my current partner in the United States Senate, Senator Alsobrooks, who I'm glad is also with us. And it's always good to be with my former partner in the United States Senate, Ben Cardin. Look, I want to say amen to everything Congressman Olszewski said and expressed, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I do believe that we face a clear and present danger in our country, a danger to our Constitution, a danger to our democracy, a danger to our country from so many of the lawless acts of the Trump administration, and especially the lawless acts of Elon Musk and his so-called Doge operation, which has nothing to do with government efficiency and everything to do with rigging the government to make it work better for people like Elon Musk and powerful special interests at the expense of everybody else. And so we are working together to fight these illegal actions in the courts, and it's been good to team up with many of the lawyers involved, and those cases have made some significant progress, including in reinstating many federal employees who were wrongfully terminated, fighting it in the Congress and in communities. Let me just close by saying a word about what Congressman Olszewski just discussed with respect to the Republican House continuing resolution. I strongly oppose that continuing resolution because I think there was a clear alternative to that and the government shutdown. The government shutdown was not the only other choice. We could have passed a short-term 30-day continuing resolution and then got to work on what Senate Republicans and Democrats had been working on previously, which is a budget that really meets the needs of our country without giving Elon Musk a blank check to continue their lawless activities. I did offer an amendment in the United States Senate on Friday to defund and shut down the illegal Musk operation. Unfortunately, it did not pass. We had 48 votes in favor of it, including one Republican, Senator Murkowski from Alaska, but 52 against, all Republicans. But nevertheless, I think that it was a mistake to pass the continuing resolution, and like Congressman Olszewski, I was disappointed that we did not muster the necessary votes on the Democratic side to block the continuing resolution so that we could then seek a reasonable alternative. And I'm happy to go into the details of that if there's interest. But in the interest of time, let me now turn it back over to Congressman Olszewski.
Thanks again, Senator Van Hollen. I really appreciate your partnership in this work and your courageous stand along with our next speaker on the continuing resolution that reinforced that this truly was a false choice. I'm next thrilled to welcome a barrier breaker for Maryland in the United States Senate, a friend of mine, someone who came from county government. Senator Alsobrooks understands that government works best when we all work together. We also, in addition to the CR, we had some really terrible news recently come from President Trump around a decision to halt the FBI's move to Maryland, something I know Senator Alsobrooks worked on tirelessly along with the federal delegation, including both Senator Cardin and Van Hollen. So Senator Alsobrooks, if you want to give some of your observations, including the short-sighted decision around that and what we're seeing, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much. First of all, to Congressman Olszewski, thank you so much for convening us tonight. And as always, I'm so happy to be on this call with Senators Van Hollen and Senator Cardin. And I want to thank everyone for taking time as well to participate in this town hall. I would say almost it's regretful that it's necessary for us to have these town halls, but we all recognize that these are really unprecedented times. And the challenges that we're seeing are ones that will have profound impacts on the state of Maryland. Now, I know you've heard this before, but I think it's really important to say that there are certain matters that are a matter of fact. It is not a matter of opinion that we are seeing dramatic impacts to our state. If we think, for example, about this awful CR that just passed, it anticipates over $200 million in cuts to NIH. It also anticipates about $880 million in cuts to Medicaid. And in addition to all of the other cuts, again, these are matters of fact. This is not what we believe that, we're presupposing that this might cause some sort of hardship to our state economically. What we know is the numbers don't lie. And the numbers laid out in this continuing resolution take very direct hits on the state of Maryland. When we think about the witch hunt that we've seen against many of the civil servants who serve, no matter who's the president, we have civil servants who served in our government, whether it's been a Democratic president or Republican president. Well, a third of the people who have been unceremoniously fired, who are going to lose their jobs, are veterans who have served our country honorably. And so this continuing resolution is one that will have very devastating impacts on every corner of our state. The impacts to the Chesapeake Bay, the impacts to our economy, these are all things, again, that are not a matter of opinion or preference. It is a matter of fact. Now, Congressman Olszewski also mentioned the FBI headquarters and the fact that President Trump mentioned last week, very cavalierly, that he intended to overrule, essentially, the years-long process that Maryland went through. We competed in order to have the national FBI headquarters located in the state of Maryland. This was not given to us. And the reason that it was awarded to the state of Maryland, that the selection decided that it would go in Greenbelt, was because it was the best value for taxpayers. What we know is that it cost $300 to $500 million more to locate the FBI. It would have been in Virginia. So we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer savings because our site in the state of Maryland in Greenbelt was the most economical site. It was also the best site from an environmental standpoint because we took cars on the road. It was the only site that was literally right at a metro. So all of the criteria we followed the process. We competed for this over 10 years. And the president, bless his heart, said that part of the reason he thought this should go to D.C. was because the FBI headquarters would be 3 hours away. Now, everyone on this call understands that that is simply not true. I would call it another name, but my grandmother told me not to use the word to begin with an L. But what we know is that how can Greenbelt be 3 hours away from Washington, D.C.? We know that's not even close. So that meant that this was just a made-up reason. So for that reason and so many more, I want you to know that Team Maryland is united in fighting for what's best for our state. And we're going to continue to do that until to make sure that we are protecting the assets of Maryland, our economy, our livelihood, and protecting the people who are here. So thank you so much again, Congressman Olszewski, for allowing me to participate. And thank you also to Senators Van Hollen, Cardin, and the rest of the delegation who've done such a wonderful job representing the state.
Well, thank you again, Senator Alsobrooks. And I just want to say again how united Team Maryland is in this fight. We know that we are facing some unprecedented challenges to our way of life, to our livelihoods. And I am so lucky to have both Senator Van Hollen and Alsobrooks leading the charge. I'm also really grateful for Senator Ben Cardin taking some time to join us tonight. Certainly, Senator Cardin is no stranger to Maryland politics, but also the United States Congress. He comes to us having served 58 years in elected office, many of those in the United States House of Representatives and the United States Senate. He's been an appropriator. He's been a leader in so many ways. And so, Senator Cardin, I just really appreciate that you have a unique perspective, I think, historically, about where we are in this place and to help us answer questions and give some thoughts tonight. So I thought before we turn to questions, we would just give you a few minutes as well, provide some observations.
Well, thank you, Congressman Olszewski. I'm a proud resident of the 2nd Congressional District, so I think I'm very well represented in the Congress, and I thank you not only for your leadership, but also listening to your constituents by having this type of an opportunity where your constituents can hear the latest from Washington, as well as an opportunity to ask questions. And I want to thank our 2 United States senators. I had the honor of serving with Senator Van Hollen, and he's now our senior senator. He does a great job in keeping our delegation together. And Senator Alsobrooks has hit the ground running under extremely difficult circumstances. So to 2 of our United States senators and to my congressman, I thank you for your representation and thank you for being there during these extremely tough times. I do want to give a little bit of an historic perspective here. I had the honor to serve as the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And make no mistake about it, autocratic regimes are growing around the world. And they look to the United States for leadership as the leader of the free world. And our leadership has now been challenged. It's been challenged because our credibility has been challenged. When President Trump says that Greenland can be part of the United States, our ally Denmark wonders whether they have a reliable partner. When Canada hears talks about Canada being a 51st state, Canada has questions as to whether there's a true friendship and alliance between the United States and Canada to preserve democratic principles. And the list goes on and on and on. The fight on Ukraine is a fight against countries that are becoming alliances against our way of life. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran. Russia's front line for defense of democracy is Ukraine. And we see how Donald Trump has put that into question. So we have a challenge in protecting democracy. And the U.S. leadership is very much being challenged. It's also being challenged in this budget. We saw what happened with our programs overseas. It happened as to politicizing our federal workforce. Our federal civil service has been the model for the world as to how a civil service should be handled in a nonpartisan environment. And now Donald Trump is changing that. And the stability of the federal workforce is very much challenged. A lot of good people are no longer going to be able to work for us. So that is a huge issue. I was just talking to some of our leaders in medical research, the great advancements that we've made in medical research, working with partners around the world. That's being challenged today with the cuts in research that we've seen at our great academic institutions, including with recent decisions by Hopkins to have to lay off so many of its workers. But our principles are being challenged by the way the president's conducting our policies. The United States has always led in anti-corruption. That's being challenged today. The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act was put on hold, which means American companies can now participate in bribes around the world. These are issues on which the leader of the free world, the United States, needs to have our president articulate the right side of these issues. This budget that was passed, the continuing resolution, is not a budget. What it is saying we're going to take last year's appropriations and make a haircut to appropriations, and that's going to be our budget for the current year. Well, that's Congress not carrying out its responsibility to pass an annual appropriation bills. And I know we in the Senate, in the last Congress, Democrats and Republicans worked together to pass appropriation bills in the Appropriations Committee. Chris Van Hollen was one of the great leaders on that. And now, with the Republicans controlling both the House and Senate, they have really turned over their responsibilities as the legislative branch of government to President Trump. That's not what a democracy is about. And this budget is not what a democracy is about. So I thank our colleagues for being in the front line of this fight. It's a fight not only for the people of Maryland, but it's really a fight for our way of life to preserve our democracy and America's global leadership.
Thank you, Senator Cardin. I think that's really important perspective, both from a budgeting viewpoint as well as what's happening with America's leadership around the world. Just a reminder for those of you who are listening in, if you want to ask a question, which we're going to turn to in a second, you can hit *3, and I would encourage you to sign up for our newsletter by pressing *6 tonight as well. So with that, we're going to turn things over. I will also just note, as we turn it over to Robin for questions, that we're proud to do these town halls. I'm proud to do this alongside our United States senators. We're proud to be accessible, to give updates and to also answer the questions, because I think that's what elected representatives should do. It's what I did as county executive, and unfortunately, we're seeing some of our colleagues refuse to do it because, frankly, I think some of what's happening is indefensible. And so we're here to give updates and encourage folks to stay involved. But really, I think it's important that we have these conversations and these updates in these town halls. So, Rob and I will turn things over to you so we can open it up for questions tonight.
Yes, sir. At the beginning of the call, we mentioned that this is an interactive forum, so we'd like to hear from you. We've got a poll question for you this evening. If you're on your phone, you can vote by pressing the corresponding number on your keypad. If you're online, you can vote by selecting your response below the streaming player. Our first poll question this evening, Congressman Olszewski knows that families continue to struggle with higher costs from gas stations to grocery stores. Do you think Congress is doing enough to lower costs? Please press 1 for yes, 2 for no. Again, Congressman Olszewski knows that families continue to struggle with higher costs from gas stations to grocery stores. Do you think Congress is doing enough to lower costs? Please press 1 for yes, 2 for no. Now let's go ahead and take our first question from Corey of Sykesville. Corey, you are live on the call with the Congressman. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, thank you so much, Senator Van Hollen, Senator Alsobrooks, Senator Cardin, and Representative Olszewski. I so appreciate everything all of you are doing and your staff as well. My question is, what's the process, and is it possible to amend the budget in this aftermath of it? And how can your constituents support that and help you do that?
Thanks for that question. I know that our guests have varying times that they can stay on tonight. They've got other obligations they have to get to. But Senator Van Hollen, I know you are an appropriator leading the state now. Is that a question that you want to take and jump in on here?
Sure, I'm happy to, and thank you, Corey, for the question. Unfortunately, in the short term, it's not possible to change the terms of the continuing resolution that was just passed. It's a 6-month continuing resolution. It will take us through September. So we should be focused, though, on 2 things. One is we are going to begin the process for the next fiscal year. The Trump administration has not yet released their budget. When they do, we'll have a better sense of, exactly what more dramatic changes they're looking for. It will also give our Republican colleagues in the House and the Senate, an opportunity to work with us to try to repair some of the damage from the CR in the next fiscal year. Whether they will be willing to do that or not, I don't know. As Senator Cardin indicated, what we're witnessing from Republicans in the Senate and the House is a total abdication of their responsibilities as member of Congress. I mean, you might as well tear up Article 1 of the Constitution, which is the article which, of course, gives Congress the power of the purse, the power to set priorities, to set the terms of budget, to determine what should be invested where. But Republicans want to hand over that authority to the President of the United States. But we'll have a chance to have another crack at this debate for the coming fiscal year in the coming months. And finally, and people should not confuse the 2 terms, what I'm talking about is the next appropriations bill. Senate and House Republicans are also working on what's called a budget reconciliation resolution, which is a fancy way of saying that they're working on a framework to pass very big tax cuts for very wealthy people at the expense of everybody else. So, for example, they've indicated that they would cut potentially $880 billion from Medicaid, or they may go after Medicare or food and nutrition programs. So that will be a separate fight. It will be coming up in a matter of months. And so we do need to unite to very much fight against that proposal. So this is going to be a moment where all of us need to work together to defend our priorities in Maryland and around the country.
Yeah, I think that's a good point there, Senator Van Hollen, around both the next appropriation, but also what's some of the really terrible, awful, short-sighted things that are being advanced or proposed in this reconciliation process to date. That's really important that we stay on top of that. Senator Cardin or Senator Alsobrooks, anything you want to add on this one?
I think Senator Van Hollen handled it well. This is the action through the end of this fiscal year, so that's in place. It's unlikely we're going to revisit that. During the reconciliation discussions, the Republicans may try to adjust some of the spending, but I can tell you it's going to be primarily tax cuts, as Senator Van Hollen said. But we got to prepare for the next budget cycle. We got to have more support out there among our constituents. And I think we really all need to invest in young people understanding history and how we've acted on these issues in the past. They have to understand civic engagement, how they can become part of the process, and they have to understand civility, because it's missing today in Washington, and we need their participation and help to make sure that we reinvest in the priorities that are going to be important for America's future.
Senator, I think we can head to our next question. Yeah.
You bet. We've got Elizabeth from Baltimore. Elizabeth, you're live on the call. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Good evening. My question is, as a constituent, what advice do you have for us in terms of how we can make meaningful impact? Yes, we can write checks. Yes, we can make phone calls, but we need some guidance, concrete, specific, about how we can be most helpful to support what you have asked us to do. Thank you.
It's a great question, Elizabeth, and I will next, after I just give you a quick response here, I'll offer if Senator Alsobrooks has a little bit she wants to add to this one. But the fact that you're on tonight is an important step. The fact that it sounds like you are politically active and you are calling and making your voice heard along with so many others is important. It's a powerful statement when we show up to these federal agencies, USAID, Social Security, budget and management. We are going to those places, and to the extent you and others are able to amplify the message that we're delivering, that these actions are bad for not just our constituents in the 2nd District or the state, but this is bad for America. This is bad for our democratic institution. We welcome that. So to the extent you can be there at the rallies and the protests, or connect with individuals in your neighborhood and across this country, that helps our job, helps us do our job as we push back against these harmful and hateful cuts, firings, and actions by this administration. Senator Alsobrooks, anything you want to add?
I think the senator has.
I think she may have
called. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But we do have another
Senator,
question for you.
Anybody? Senator Cardin, anything you want to add there?
This is
I
Chris.
think you can.
This is Chris Van Hollen. If I could just add, in addition to participating in the rallies here in Maryland, to the extent that you know people in other states and other congressional districts, it's really important to pick up the phone, call them, send them a message on Facebook or whatever it may be, and urge them to be contacting their members of Congress and their senators, especially if you know people in states where we have Republican senators or districts with Republican Congress people, because they need to be hearing from their constituents. As Congressman Olszewski said, they are beginning to hear from their constituents, so much so that some of them are actually running away, literally, from their town hall meetings. But the more they're hearing from their constituents, the better, and the more you can reach out to people either individual friends or through professional associations or other sort of workplace associations. All of that makes a difference if we want to build a bigger wave going forward. And I'll just close by saying the way we protected the Affordable Care Act in the end of the day many years ago was because of the popular sort of uprising around the country to protect people with pre-existing health conditions, and ultimately in that very dramatic vote in the United States Senate where John McCain joined the Democrats and voted down the effort to repeal the Affordable Care Act. That was because of the groundswell of public opinion around the country. And so whatever you can do to encourage that, please do.
If I could add just one additional point to that, and that is, Senator Van Hollen's right. We have to affect public opinion and support here. And one of the ways you can do it is put a face on the issues rather than the numbers. We all know people who are directly impacted by the policies of the Trump administration, state workers who have lost their jobs, people who now are wondering, researchers who are no longer getting the funds that they need, people who are, when we add the face to the issue and people recognize what is involved here, we can change public opinion. We need to echo those stories. We need to be storytellers about what's happening in our communities, because there's many people in our community who are just not informed. We have to help inform them.
Thank you, gentlemen. Remember, folks, if you'd like to ask a question this evening, it's *3 on your telephone keypad. And if you would like to subscribe to the Congressman's e-newsletter, that's *6 on your telephone keypad. Our next question comes from Jerry of Parkville. Jerry, you're live on the call. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, this is Gary with 2 R's. So it is a little bit like Jerry. Anyway, my question kind of starts off with a statement. I'm an avid listener of Morning Joe. This morning they talked about the lowest positive opinion of Democrats and the Democratic Party within the Democrats ever. And, to me, it's all marketing and communications. The Republicans seem to have it all over the Democrats in this area. What can be done to make marketing and communications more effective and consistent between, the entire, I hate to use the word, tribe, for all of these messages that you would like to get out? Because, I'll say all through the general election and everything else, I just think we got our clock clean, and some major effort needs to be done there. Is there anything you can all give us as a glimmer of hope for this besides it being up to us to echo your messages?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. It's not just up to you. I know that I have a job to do here, and I'm ready to do it. I think that you're absolutely right. As Democrats and as elected representatives, we have to be clear-eyed about what we stand for. And if you check out any of my social media accounts, it's unequivocal what I'm about. I'm about defending democracy, and I'm about lowering costs for American families. And I think that is so important as we go forward. We had an election that was about lowering costs, and no one's talking about it. In fact, we're seeing the opposite. So really just pointing out the fact that there's been no action, no bills brought to the floor under Republican leadership to lower costs, and a president who's taking actions to increase costs and lower our 401ks with the stock market. Talking about the fact that we're going to drive up costs through things like cuts to Medicaid, cuts that will hurt women, children, the disabled, people who are the most vulnerable, cuts that might close hospitals and nursing homes. And doing all of that, as was mentioned earlier, to further enrich the ultra wealthy at the expense of everyday families. And so you've got my commitment that I will continue to be laser focused on those kitchen table issues, reminding my colleagues and the public that we have a job to do here. And that's to fight for the average Marylander, the average American. And I think that if, as a party, but also just as representatives, if we do that right, and we can point out the disconnect between what I think was the overwhelming issue of the campaign and what's not happening in terms of lowering costs and what is happening in terms of rising costs, both by tariffs, firing employees, taking away services, I think that will change the dynamic. But we have work to do. We have a story to tell, and you've got my commitment to do it. If any of the senators are still on and want to share some thoughts on that, I'd welcome them as well.
So this is Chris. I number one, agree with what Congressman Olszewski just said in terms of the content of our message, and we need to contrast it clearly with what I see as the great betrayal from Donald Trump, who said he was going to lower prices on day one, and of course has focused on everything else, including, the lawless actions that we're seeing and the Musk operation. And so I do think we need to remind people of that betrayal and that broken promise. I think that we, Democrats, need to put forward a clear, positive alternative. And I believe when it comes to this tax fight, we should have our own plan. And I'm working on an alternative, but our own plan to contrast it with their plan to give tax breaks to very wealthy at the expense of everybody else. The last thing I will add is we can have the best message of the world, but if we're not able to reach people through different communication channels, we're like the tree falling in the forest that nobody hears. And so Democrats do need to do a much better job of getting onto all the channels that people are now listening to. And when I say channels, I mean all the modes of communication, including podcasts, including, blogs, including social media, not just cable, but when we go on cable, it should be Fox as well as the other channels. So it's both the content of the message, but also the ability to reach people. And we just need to do a much better job of getting on all those lines of communication.
I do agree with Congressman Olszewski and Senator Van Hollen that we really need to concentrate on the cost issues. I think that is where most Americans are mostly concerned about. And there's a lot of ways that we need to make sure that we continue to focus on that issue. One is what Donald Trump's doing to the economy. The uncertainty on his tariff policies is driving havoc with our economy. Now that the president's people are acknowledging we could be going into a recession, that's going to affect everyone. We're going to see higher costs through the tariffs, or the uncertainty as to whether a tariff is going to be imposed or not. The imports are still going to be reflecting higher pricings because of that uncertainty. So we're going to see Americans suffering even more, and we have to put a big spotlight on that. And so I do think it's that issue is probably the most important strategic issue that we all focus on. We have to have discipline and have to repeat that message over and over and over again.
Thank you, gentlemen. Folks, we had such a great response to our first poll question. We'd like to ask a second, and we do thank you for your input. We appreciate you. The second question, we want to know what issues matter most to you. Is it the economy? Press 1 if it's the economy. Press 2 for immigration. 3 for national security. 4 for healthcare. And 5 if it's something else. And if you're streaming or you can add your comments if you're online. Again, the question is, we want to know what issues matter most to you. Press 1 for economy, press 2 for immigration, press 3 for national security, press 4 for healthcare, and press 5 if it's something else. Our next question comes from Sherry of Baltimore County. Sherry, you're live on the call. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. One of you mentioned the need to better educate citizens. Can you tell me what section in the recently passed CR mentions the removal of Medicare or Medicaid, Social Security, as I've been hearing throughout the conversations that Democrats are having across the nation?
Yeah, Sherry, thanks for the question. I actually think Senator Van Hollen and Cardin mentioned this a little bit recently. There's a little bit of a need to distinguish between the CR and the budget, which is more of a roadmap for spending. The typical CR is something that just continues to fund the government, which is called a clean CR. This most recent one that was passed, in addition to not having instruction, which gives that blank check to the president and Elon Musk, actually does include funding cuts for things like veterans, nutrition assistance, and more. But what is of, I think, even greater concern for those of us on this call, certainly for me, is what was put forward as the Republican budget, which is part of that reconciliation process. So there's an initial budget bill that gives general instructions, which is followed by a future bill that actually spells out the specific cuts. And so the budget that was passed as the start of a reconciliation process that passed out of the House does call for tax cuts. And Republicans have been clear that this is meant to continue the Trump-era tax cuts, which disproportionately impact the ultra wealthy and support them, and can only be paid for by cutting entitlements. And so by committee of jurisdiction, just based on the sheer volume of cuts, $880 billion will significantly impact Medicaid, especially because we've been told Social Security and Medicare wouldn't be touched, which it still will be hard to do that. So, in Maryland's 2nd District, just for example, there are 152,000 people who are at risk of losing their health care under that plan. That includes over 60,000 children under the age of 19, and over 13,000 of our seniors. And so it is very concerning to us about people losing health care, hospitals closing, nursing, so that we're not trying to be hyperbolic, but there's no way to reach that level of savings without cutting those fundamental programs. And so to the extent this budget reconciliation process continues, you will see those cuts spelled out in future bills. They're not mentioned by name, they're mentioned by committee of jurisdiction. So I don't know if either senator wants to affirm that or correct that. I am the new guy on the block here, but that's sort of my understanding of the state of play and our concern around those cuts.
Well, go ahead, Ben.
Go ahead, Chris. I know you have the time problem.
Well, so Congressman Olszewski described well the distinction between the ongoing spending bills, which was what the continuing resolution that just passed was about, versus the budget reconciliation process. And the main difference, not to get too far in the weeds, is the budget reconciliation process is designed to go after what we call mandatory spending as opposed to annual spending. So, for example, Social Security is mandatory spending, Medicare is mandatory spending, Medicaid is mandatory spending, and tax cuts are in the mandatory category. And so that is sort of, we're previewing what we've seen in the Republican budget resolution framework. And the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, these are the umpires, the people who call the balls and strikes, have said publicly that in order to achieve the size of the tax cuts that Republicans want for very wealthy people, they're going to have to make dramatic cuts in Medicaid. They're also going to, by the way, increase the deficit and debts a lot. And finally, I want to distinguish between that process and what you are hearing a lot about right now, which are these Elon Musk Doge cuts to the personnel at various government agencies, like the Social Security Administration. If you end up cutting thousands of people from the Social Security Administration, it may not impact the size of your Social Security benefit, but it may very well influence negatively your ability to actually get it delivered. Or if you have a problem with your Social Security payment, you're not going to get someone on the telephone. They just got rid of a lot of the telephone services. So when it comes to, for example, the Social Security Administration, it's the cuts that are going to impede people's ability to get their benefits in many cases, not an actual cut to the benefit. So I wanted to make that distinction, and I apologize for having to jump off the call. It's great to be with Ben Cardin and Congressman Olszewski. Thank you very much for pulling it together, and Senator Alsobrooks and I look forward to continuing to work with you across the House and the Senate.
Yeah, thanks again for being on tonight, Chris. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
I could just add one point to that very quickly. I'm a former member of the Senate Finance Committee, and the Senate Finance Committee has instructions under the Budget Act. They're going to have to bring out a tax bill. We know that. That's what the Republicans have put their top priority. That tax bill is going to cost a significant amount of revenue. The committee then has to offset that, what's under the committee's jurisdiction. So they're going to do one of two things. They only have one or two choices of that magnitude of dollars. They're either going to cut Medicaid and Medicare, or they're going to wave a magic wand and increase the deficit dramatically, or they're going to do both. We know in 2017, when they passed their tax bill, they said they weren't going to increase the deficit, but it increased the deficit dramatically, the 2017 tax bill. So two things are likely to happen as a result of the tax bill and the Budget Reconciliation Act, and that is cuts in the health programs of Medicaid and Medicare and adding to the deficit.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, again, if you would like to ask a question this evening, it's *3 on your telephone keypad. And if you're enjoying this update and wish to stay informed, please consider subscribing to the Congressman's e-newsletter. You can do that by pressing *6. Our next question comes from Lisa from Randallstown. Lisa, you're live on the call. Please go ahead and ask your question, Lisa.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this call, and thank you for allowing me to ask my question. I have a concern and a question. My concern is with the unfettered access that Elon Musk has to all of these federal systems. The first thing that he does when he goes into an agency, it goes into his system. And it's way too much private information for one citizen to have. When the Democrats have tried to subpoena him to come to committees and talk about what they're looking at and justify all of these savings that he says the Republicans block it. My question is, what kind of alternative plans or tools is Congress and maybe the Senate as well trying to come up with to circumvent his actions, since you're not allowed to bring him before your committees? Thank you.
Yeah, another great question. Thank you, Lisa, for that. I want to just first say I'm totally with you on the need to protect Americans' private information. Elon Musk and Doge is accessing some of the most sensitive of our systems, and without any protections or oversights. And so I want you to know that I'm already on and supporting and co-sponsoring legislation that would make sure, for example, that Doge has to comply with transparency laws like FOIA. I believe the public deserves and needs to know what it's doing. There are also bills that would go in and have them have to make sure that they are following standards that we ask other members of the workforce to participate in. I know that Democrats on oversight are trying to work overtime. They have more than 1,000 requests for information and documentation varying letters. But to your point, I think we should be under no illusion that we can get any of this done with a Republican majority that at this point has shown no signs of stepping up to take actions to really address the concern that you and others have raised. But I think we have to continue trying. I think to Senator Van Hollen's point earlier, we have to make sure that representatives in other districts are hearing these concerns, that they're hearing them from their constituents as well, because that's how we change. That's how we change things. That's how we pass these laws. That's how we get oversight to actually do their oversight function. It's how we pull Elon Musk in front of us to answer for what he's doing and how he's doing it. So no easy answers, but we certainly are also supporting court efforts to push back. I think actually all members of the House who are the Democratic Party supported an amicus brief about the Consumer Financial Bureau. And so in those places we can step up, we are. But again, this is about us doing our job in Congress, but also partnering with all of you to raise those collective voices, both here, but also across the country.
Thank you, Congressman. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I would just add that with the Republicans controlling both the House and Senate and the White House, it is a challenge for the Democrats to initiate congressional action. However, it's not impossible. There are opportunities that we'll have in committees that we might be able to get amendments as part of legislation or during the appropriation process that opens up transparency. We can try to get votes, particularly in committees, that will be very difficult for Republicans to vote against transparency. So there are going to be opportunities that we're going to work in all of our committees to try to get accountability by what Elon Musk is doing and to try to open up the process as much as we possibly can. But make no mistake about it, it's going to be a challenge. The third, Article 3 judges are going to be one of our major weapons to try to preserve the democracy and the democratic principles of transparency. And Congress can help Article 3 courts with amicus briefs and other ways that we can put a spotlight on issues that can help articulate those issues that go to our courts.
Thank you. We have an online question submitted by Nicholas. The question is, while a government shutdown is a lose-lose for everyone, do you believe that Senator Schumer was right to vote for passing the CR?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And a shutdown certainly is a lose-lose, and no one was cheering for it. But I do not think that we took the right action in supporting a Republican-led CR that actually led to cuts and a blank check for this president and for Elon Musk. So as I said at the top, I was very disappointed with the very few colleagues who allowed this budget to become law. I applaud both Senator Van Hollen and Senator Alsobrooks for recognizing that it was a false choice that was being presented. We did not have to choose between a bad budget and a shutdown. Compromise was possible. I actually joined House Democrats in sending a letter to Senator Schumer supporting the 4-week measure that would have allowed everyone to come back to the table and do, as Senator Cardin had said before tonight, that we could hammer out a long-term appropriations deal that included Democrats, that was truly bipartisan, and that worked for all Americans. And so I think we have to get back. I support the notion that we have to get back to passing these annual appropriation bills. This cycle of Band-Aids and budget shutdowns has to stop. But it was truly a false choice. I don't support the action ultimately taken, which is why I voted no in the House. And again, I joined my senators and all but one member of the House delegation in voting no as well. I think we all took the right stand on this issue. But, it's passed. We're ready to fight what's next and keep moving forward because we do have this reconciliation process underway. We will have another appropriations fight at the end of this fiscal year in September. And so we've got a lot of important work ahead of us.
Thank you so much, sir. Folks, we've got one last poll question for you, our last poll question of the evening. The administration has embarked on a mass cost-cutting endeavor implemented by the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. This has included the mass layoff of federal workers. We want to know, do you support DOGE's efforts and the elimination of government workers? Press 1 for yes, please press 2 for no. Again, I'll repeat the question for you. The administration has embarked on a mass cost-cutting endeavor implemented by the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. This has included the mass layoffs of federal workers. Do you support DOGE's efforts and the elimination of government workers? Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. And thank you so much. We truly appreciate your participation this evening. We've got time for one last question before I hand the call back over to the Congressman. We've got Matt from Westminster. Let me just grab Matt. Matt, you are live on the call. Please go ahead and ask your question, Matt. Hello? Matt, you're live on the call. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, good afternoon. Good evening. So my question is, first of all, I'd like to ask a quick question. I know I didn't ask this originally, but why is everybody a Democrat or a Republican and not an American, first of all? Second of all, I'd like to know why we send so much money overseas whenever there's people here struggling. We need to keep our money home until we're right, and then send it overseas if we can. I'm done.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I'm proud to be an American above all. I'm proud to be a Christian before I'm an American, and proud to be an American before I worry about party affiliation. I'm proud that as county executive, I work closely with Republicans to pass our budgets, unanimous with Democrats and Republicans. We invested in things together. We came together to pass common sense legislation that moved us forward on economic development, public safety. And so I actually come at this work as someone who wants to have our agreements be bipartisan. And unfortunately, what I've experienced since becoming a member of Congress is that the majority party has had no interest in working with me or my colleagues. I'm holding out hope that we can change that because I think it's important. I think that's what the American people want. And I think that lowering costs shouldn't be a partisan issue, right? Things that put money back in the pockets of hardworking Americans doesn't need to be partisan. So actually, I really appreciate that question. As it relates to foreign aid, I will tell you, as someone who serves on the Foreign Affairs Committee, I have seen and gotten briefings and really worry about what pulling back from the rest of the world means for America and our interests and our security. So, not only is the Chinese communist government already made it abundantly clear that they're more than happy to step in and fill the void when we stop education programs, feeding programs. But we also know that those concerns might come to our shore. If we're not fighting things like Ebola in foreign countries, that can come to our shores in the United States. If we're not feeding hungry kids across the world, that's actually pulling back support for American farmers that are providing those resources. And so, this is one fraction of our budget. It's less than 1%. So when we talk about efficiency and cost, this is really not what's driving American investment, but it is driving both American safety and supporting things like American farmers to provide those services. So I think it's actually important that we continue to do programs like that. I think it's both good for us domestically and internationally. I'll let Senator Cardin close, since again, he led the Committee for Foreign Affairs for many years, and then we'll wrap things up.
Well, Johnny, I think you handled it perfectly. The foreign aid budget's less than 1% of the of our total budget. It is in our national security interest to be engaged, as you said. Let me just quote from General Mattis, the former Secretary of Defense and a well-known leader of our Department of Defense. And what he said, if you don't give the State Department their foreign aid budget, you better be prepared to give me 10 times as much in soldiers that we need to defend our nation. Stability around the world makes a more peaceful and economically prosperous world, and that's in our national security interest. So it's a very small part. It's part of our DNA as far as our values are concerned. And if we're not there, China will be there. I guarantee you that. And that's not in our national security interest.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, Senator. We've come to the end of our live event this evening, but before we end the call, Congressman, I'd love to invite you to share your final thoughts.
Yeah, well, and Robin, thank you again for your great job moderating tonight. I want to thank everyone who's still on for participating in our second virtual town hall. I want to especially thank our special guests, Senator Chris Van Hollen, Angela Alsobrooks, and Senator Ben Cardin. As your member of Congress, I really believe in accountability, transparency, and communication. I will continue to offer frequent and varied ways to stay connected with you all throughout the term. So please stay connected with me, with our office. We look forward to meeting with you throughout district days if you visit us in DC and through future town halls. So I hope everyone has a wonderful St. Patrick's Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day. And again, thank you all for joining tonight and your interest in the work that we do.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us for this important Access Live event with Congressman Johnny Olszewski. We truly appreciate the opportunity to speak directly with you this evening and answer your questions. If we weren't able to get to your question this evening, you can leave a voicemail after the event. You can send us an email through our website or call our office at 410-427-5725. Again, that number, 410-427-5725. We'll host more of these events in the future, and we'll keep you informed on what we're working on and other important updates. Thanks again, and have a blessed evening. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.